Right, let's make sure this is recording. Right, so hello, I'm Ben Woodthorpe, and this is Abdullah Mia. Abdullah, I've known you for years, haven't I? We went to university together, didn't we?
Yeah, far too long. And if you think about it, it's 20 years.
Shows our age, doesn't it, that? Shows
yeah. Yeah, let's not talk too much about that.
No, whoa, walk away from the age conversation. So the reason why I wanted to have a bit of a chat with you, Abs, is obviously we're going through a bit of a weird time at the moment. And before, I want to ask a few questions. I know in my past I've had times where I've probably wanted to talk to someone, but maybe haven't tried to access it for pride or whatever reason it might be. But do you want to just say what you do so everyone understands where you're coming from and what your profession is?
Yeah. So I'm a consultant clinical psychologist. So what clinical psychologists do is that they end up doing a standard psychology degree. Some people don't. And then some people will go on to do a master's, and then they'll train on a doctoral course after gaining some experience. That's the average kind of path in. And they end up training across with a whole range of ages to think about how psychological theory can help people who are really distressed. For me, I've spent most of my time working with people who have what is classed as severe and enduring mental health difficulties. So when people have really unusual experiences, they might hear or see things and become really, really distressed.
Wow.
So in the later part of my career, I've spent most of my time working with people who have had those experiences, as well as they may have committed offences or done things that are against the law. And usually what we know is that this kind of thing happens or mental health distress and stuff like that happens when people have got really traumatized backgrounds. So a lot of the people that I end up working with have got really traumatized histories and challenging environments that they've grown in. So there's poverty, there's a lot of complexity around that. So my job is to help people understand their experiences and then think about how they can manage them, think about them, or cope with them in a different way. So yeah. I currently work in what's classed as a medium secure unit, which is for people who, like I said, have committed offences, also have mental health problems, are classed as a risk to other people.
Right. Okay.
And I was going to say as well, the thing about it is that I've spent the last 10 years working predominantly with men, but so I have a bit of an awareness of how men approach it. So, when you said men can sometimes really struggle with thinking about where to ask for help and things.
I think we're terrible. We're just... I just go through my, people I know. We're not very good at admitting we need help generally, are we? Really, if ever we do.
And I think, when you couple that with the whole idea of the British values of actually, that stiff upper lip, that stoicism, that we'll get through it, which is really important. But then men have also had an erosion of, when people might go to the pub and chat to their mates, there's not that many spaces where guys will now get together and just have a conversation. And I think that's impacted on people's mental health as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. So sort of talking to that, you were sort of mentioning when you were talking through what you do and what your experiences are and how you work with people, you sort of mentioned that you effectively help people through things. Is that almost like a counselling role? Do you talk through things and how does that work? I've got no idea how counselling...
It's a really weird thing when you talk to people about counselling and stuff like that. They have images of Fraser Crane,
sitting on a couch,
or lying on a couch or something, or Freud. Freud always comes up. And if you're ever at a dinner party, somebody will turn around and say, "Actually, you know what? Are you reading my mind?"
Aren't you, Abs?
But the reality is that the first part of it is often building a relationship. Building a really meaningful relationship. And it's not often that you have a relationship with someone where you can talk totally openly without being judged and being cared for. So one of the things I really enjoy about this role is just caring for people and genuinely giving them an open space to do so. So that's the counselling element. What clinical psychology also does is, there's a very fine line between clinical psychology, counselling psychology, counsellors, and it usually depends on the level of training people have as well. but it's usually about applying psychological theory that's been developed academically into how people's lives develop.
Right, okay.
So it's a combination of the interpersonal stuff that we have, the relationships that we build, along with the theory that we know. And then there's this thing called a formulation that we all do as psychologists. And that's basically our understanding with the person we're working with as to what might have gone on in their lives, what's happened to them that has got them to be where they are now. So everyone has these life experiences that shapes the way we think, the way we feel, the way we are around others.
Yeah. And I suppose there's at whatever level, I mean, obviously you talked about different levels, counts, different sort of levels of qualification, but am I right in thinking that a consistent thing is really empathy and listening to what people have to say and being someone to really just almost sound off to a little bit? Am I wrong? Is that the wrong way?
No, I don't think it's the wrong way to think about it. I think it's really important to think about that. People do need to have a space to sound off to.
Yeah.
However, if this becomes the way they cope, as a psychologist, I'm not really helping them. What I'm doing is building up a dependency that makes me feel good about the idea that actually people are going to come and sound off and then I'm doing my job. The reality is what we do is that we start to see patterns. What are the patterns that are forming in people's lives? And then what can they actually do to help change those patterns? Sometimes it might be challenging their thinking. Sometimes it might be recognizing when they get into a particular way of relating to someone, but understanding where it's come from and knowing that the problem's not located in the person. Often when we talk about mental health, people always often say, actually, the problem's in it, and often diagnoses and things like that can really locate in the person. Whereas what therapy can often do is really think about a broad range of things that happen and how that changes a person's life.
Yeah. Okay. So what's your take on the current climate? Let's be completely honest. I imagine some of the books being readjusted a little bit in what you do, and there's a lot of different things probably going to be coming down the pipe, shall we say, in terms of people's mental health as a result of what's going on. Might not be directly affecting you and your role, but what could you comment on sort of loneliness and social isolation? And
yeah, I think the biggest thing to distinguish first is everyone's currently using these words, social distancing.
Yeah, it's right? A big label, isn't it? It's a big label.
And I think one of the big key things, and I've mentioned it in various other conversations before, one of the key things is always around, actually, we shouldn't be socially distancing ourselves at all. What we should be doing is physically distancing ourselves.
Yeah, right? That's important.
So we're physically separate, but now more than ever, we really need to be in contact with people, we're in a really wonderful time where we've got social media, we're doing this over video, right? Where we can stay connected with people, but we don't have to be physically close with people. So we protect them. And I think that's the key part. So when people say social distancing, it's really important to hold in mind that we actually mean physically distancing and not socially. Yeah. So we want to be socially close. However, when we are physically distant, we're going to be lonely.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really challenging. As humans, we're social beings, right? And I think part of what makes the loneliness harder is there's a distinction to be had between anxiety and fear, right? And currently what we've got is that we've got a lot of unknowns. A lot of us don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we might get COVID-19. We don't know if we're going to be able to manage it. We don't know if our friends have it. And that sense of impending doom can be a real challenge.
It's everywhere, isn't it? It's everywhere you look, everywhere, anywhere you go and talk to someone, it's on the tip of everyone's tongue to be talking about it, isn't it? And I suppose it kind of grows and grows and grows and grows.
Yeah.
And it's just anxiety magnified, isn't it? Really, especially if you're going home and sitting on your own. I mean, I'm really lucky. I've got a family. I've got kids downstairs. My missus I spend every night with, and it's kind of a lovely time almost. I'm spending more time with my family, but there are some people out there that they might only see one person a day and then see all of this on the news, and it's quite tough, isn't it, really?
Yeah, but even when you're with your family, if you're working out of your home, so there are some people who are able to work from home, but if you are one of those key workers that has to go out and help, you then have to have the added pressure of, if I come back into my home, who am I going to potentially affect?
Yeah.
Right? But then also, as a parent, you'll know that you don't really want to talk about all this stuff with kids around, with younger people around as well, because that's going to increase their anxiety. And one of the things that we know how we cope with our anxiety is being around other people and talking about it and thinking it through.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges is that because it's all over the news all the time, it's on the news, it's on social media, everyone's talking about it, you can't escape it. So I think one of the important things to think about is, how do we limit our exposure to that? Because what happens is there's this, so I like to think of it as we have our own conscious thoughts, but then there's the social thoughts that go around as well. So what's going on in the world, which pushes down on us. And then on top of that, if you want to go with the unconscious stuff, the things that we don't keep in our mind often, and that is what's going to happen, that's pushing down on us as well. So I think everybody is feeling this weird sense of pressure and anxiety. And recently I keep hearing people talking about sleep. Their sleep is broken, they're not sleeping properly.
Yeah. A member of my family, you know, has been struggling with sleep. He's fine now. He's had a little bit of a snuffle, got a bit anxious about it, struggled to sleep, and you know, might not be the right thing for everyone, but I mean, we have one of those portal video call things where you can video, you know, Facebook thing, video on the TV. It's a bit like a big Skype. So we had a video call, sort of made sure our daughter was there, 5-month-old daughter, made her laugh and you know, sort of chuckle in front of him, and it was much better after that. He was so much more chilled out. I mean,
you're right, and I think one of the crucial things is that you've said some of the things that we can do is we forget how part of our routine are built up. So the idea of getting up in the morning and getting dressed and going to work. So if you're working from home and you're on your own and you're working from home, one of the things that some people might do is choose not to get dressed, right? And they might be dressed in more casual clothes. However, the problem with that is, or the problem that can be presented is, you don't shift your mind into thinking, I'm getting ready for work. And then you don't get in your car and you don't go on.
You said you can't read minds, Abs. I've worked from home for 15 years now, and you're very right. I mean, I have an office in Derby, but generally speaking, I work from home when I'm not in the office. And sometimes there'll be a lot of people just starting to work from home. My experience is it's very hard to kind of split the two sort of versions of me apart. I mean, today I've done a live training webinar about Microsoft Teams, and then I go downstairs and I spend some time with my daughter, and then we're having this chat, and then it's kind of, you know, it's hard to rationalize the two sometimes, and your focus is very split. And yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I'm used to it, but for people who it's new to, that could be quite tough, couldn't it, really?
Yeah. And as a psychologist and therapist, generally, we really think about what boundaries are and what boundaries mean. And what's happening at the moment is our boundaries are being slightly eroded. So our boundaries around what happens at work and what happens in our home life are getting really blurred. And if you're not used to it, that can cause, so usually, for example, for me, what I tend to do is I have a drive home, and on the drive home, I have certain things that I have signposts for, which make me think, right, I'm going to leave this problem here, and then I'm going to leave another problem there. And then in the drive back to work in the following morning, I kind of pick it up as I go in, right? So I've left my work brain on the journey home, and I then pick it up on the way back into work. And if you're working from home, you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
If you're working from home, like you said, you've got your head on, then you go downstairs, play with your kids, and especially if you're teaching kids at home as well. If you're doing homeschooling, that's going to make everything even more complicated.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think one of the biggest things is getting a routine back in.
Yeah.
One thing that can be really helpful is being really boundaried with your routine. And it doesn't necessarily mean telling your kids who you're trying to homeschool, oh, by the way, you can't bother me between 9 and 3, because that's not going to work.
No.
But in your mind, having a think about how can you structure your day? What are your working hours going to be? What are you going to be homeschooling? Where are you going to have lunch? Who are you going to connect with? It's really important that one of the things that we've started doing at work is, because we're physically distancing ourselves as well, is having Zoom and Microsoft Teams kind of video conferencing before and at the end of the day, just to touch in with each other.
Good idea. It's a great idea, isn't it? That's that face-to-face social contact. Make sure you. Sometimes you need a little bit of banter, don't you?
Exactly, and that's it. So those meetings aren't about me sharing information. Those meetings are just about, and it's taken us a while to get used to, just about how about we just kick back, and those little conversations that you have in the office that are just passing conversations. So people might have a few jokes, people will talk about their day, people about what happened the night before, although it's kind of static at the moment, or watch Netflix, or watch this, or watch that.
Yeah.
But there's having that routine, which is really key.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'd say is, if you're bombarded with news, limit your news. Limit your access to the news, right? The news is not going to change significantly over 12 hours. So think about what news you're going to listen to, but also really fact check. So I don't know about you, but my WhatsApp has been bombarded with all manner of stuff.
Massively. I mean, I know through a friend of mine, someone who works for the BBC World Service, and I've heard that, I mean, their primary focus is sort of battling misinformation at the moment. I mean, horrendous misinformation that's being spread out there around things like ways of curing yourself that are completely factually incorrect, ways to, keep the virus at bay, and it's ridiculous. And especially with social media, and some people live on social media. I mean, what are your? I've always I listen to quite a few podcasts, and something that comes up quite a lot in the podcasts I listen to is the phrase echo chamber. So what is that something you think, kind of almost like a rumination of a group of people that you spend time with, who are all watching the same news, who are all saying the same thing, and kind of add into this anxiety? But it's quite hard, isn't it? Because rather than it just being news, it's kind of coming from friends as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's really hard, because what happens with that is you don't want to get onto social media too much, because it's not going to be great for you. But your friends are all on social media, so you want to connect with them. So then you're in this really awkward bind of, how am I going to manage staying in touch with people without being inundated with this information or misinformation about coronavirus? And I think sometimes it's really nice when you see some of your friends doing other things. So I don't know if you noticed on social media a couple of days ago, there was this thing of, post a picture of a beach or post a picture of something else which isn't related, so we can flood the timelines. Yeah. So it's really important to try and change people's ideas as to what they're going to social media for.
Yeah. And I mean, in our, obviously we're friends, we've known each other quite a while, so our WhatsApp group for the uni friends that's been flooded. Probably everyone's just been flooded with random stuff.
That WhatsApp group is really nice, because the other thing is, what I've noticed in my various WhatsApp groups and friends, people are posting a little bit of coronavirus stuff, but then a lot of just random stuff.
There's one particular guy that post the bulk of the random stuff. We won't tell you exactly what's on there.
But I really appreciate it, because it makes me think, actually, you know what? It's really important to just be a bit lighthearted about it. Humour is really important.
Yeah.
But also within that, it's a way in which, especially men, try to be kind to each other. So our group were kind to each other through that use of banter and humour, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah. No,
really valuable.
I do.
Within that, I wanted to say something though, that as we get really anxious, people start to think we've got a mental health problem, right? But we've got to remember that generally it's not a mental health problem, because it's totally normal to be anxious about what's going on.
It's almost like, I suppose, if you go to the base of what we are, and the core of, we're animals really, aren't we? Let's be honest. Is it a survival mechanism, would you say, to be a little bit worried and fearful, going back
Yeah,
to being
yeah,
when we're cavemen, really?
yeah. And if you really think about it as well, what we're saying is that there's this life-threatening um, virus around that we don't really know how we're going to manage and stop it, other than wash your hands, stay away from people, right? And if you can, wear a mask if you do need to go out and stuff, right? Now, if that's the news that's going around everywhere, I came across someone as a psychologist and they said, "Oh yeah, I'm not really concerned about it, it doesn't bother me," I'd be really worried. I'd be like, they're either really defended against this anxiety,
Yeah.
or they're just not taking it seriously. This is something that it's really important to be kind of anxious about,
Yeah.
but not to think that you're weak or you can't cope or anything like that. It's totally normal.
Yeah. Yeah. So I suppose if I sort of think about what you've sort of said, that I don't want to. I hate using the word tool. When people say, "Oh, I'm going to leave you with some tools and techniques." I mean, no. I don't like the sound of that. But I suppose what you're saying is there are things that you can do to take your mind out of the anxiety a little bit, by maybe giving yourself, if your world's been turned upside down from your normal structure, try and take some control over the situation and put some structure in your life, so that I suppose the word isn't. I suppose taking control is not the right way of putting it. I don't know whether it is.
It can be. I think sometimes you can get really caught up in the kind of language we use. And from the way I am as a psychologist, I'm like, actually, you know what? If people are using language that fits with them, use that language.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Don't be trying to tell people how and when they should be doing things, right? It's how can we do it together and using the language that people have. So if it is about control for people, then you use that. But we spoke about routine. So the first thing is get a routine in. So sometimes that might involve distraction techniques, right? So some people might get distracted, but also fill your day with doing things that give you purpose and meaning and value.
And probably a bit of joy as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that link, as if by magic, you've linked in with one of the other key things. One thing that we're not paying attention, that the news isn't talking about, is the amount of care and kindness people are showing to each other.
Oh, I mean, I must admit, every day, because I'm trying to eke out as much parental leave as possible, and I was kind of already on lockdown from last November when my daughter arrived, so I'm kind of issues to this. And every day around 2:00, she goes full, Incredible Hulk on me. And she screams. There's nothing you can do to calm her down. She goes absolutely, off the reservation, whatever you want to call it. So my thing is, I usually take her out for a walk. I stick my headphones in, put a podcast on, listen to some cheesy 80s, whatever, and have a bit of walk around the block. Up until recently, people were, like, "How you doing?" Like this, but recently, I live down south now. I live not far from Hitchin, not too far from Stevenage. I'm from Derby, so I sound very, very different to everyone around here. They're already, posh compared to me. And I usually say hello, and usually it is that whoop. But recently it's been, "How you doing?" And yeah, we're on the other side of the road. We've had a few conversations. I've met neighbours I didn't know I had, because we not long ago moved into this house, and we're looking to have a little green, which is really quiet. Sometimes I walk Polly around the green, and people have come out in the garden and said, things like, "Oh, you've come out at a different time today." A little bit worrying that there's that much attention, but generally quite nice. It's a way of striking a conversation. It's quite nice, actually, to be fair. And I with you, I've noticed a lot more openness and, wanting to converse and chat and talk to people. And I've heard people, as I've been passing by here in other conversations, like, "Are you okay? Have you got everything you need?" Maybe it might be an elderly person. And, go back a month, would you hear that? No.
And I think that's really important. So there's been initiatives in the local area where I live, where people have posted letters through other people's post boxes saying, "If you need anything, do this with instructions." So there's a community ethos being built as well, which is really helpful. So you can stay connected through social media, but also through, it's important to make sure you phone your families and your friends, do video links and things like that. There are a couple of other tips that we can quickly run through. So there's a psychologist called Russ Harris, who's done this really great breakdown of how you can approach this kind of stuff. And he's done it with the anagram, I think it is. Let's go with that. Face COVID, right? So each letter representing something.
Yeah.
Right. So the first thing is, really importantly, focus on what's in your control. There are some things in our control, and there are some things, like you said earlier, that just aren't. Right? We can't control what's going to happen in the future. We can't control what's happened in the past. Control what's happening now. Right? That's the face bit. That's the first bit. Focus on what's in your control. The A part of face is really acknowledge what's going on for you, your thoughts and your feelings. What we can often do when we get anxious is that we can switch off for them, or we can try and avoid them. We're not going to be able to avoid this. So it's really important just to take a step back and think, actually, you know what? I'm going to acknowledge my thoughts and feelings here, and just where are they located in my body? Right. So when we start thinking about the C part of face COVID, it's come back to your body. So there's this old practice that I found really useful called the 4-second breath, right? So when you find yourself getting really anxious, sometimes some people will find if you deep breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, slowly breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold your out breath for 4 seconds. And if you do that for 5 minutes, it can really lower your central nervous system, which currently everyone's is really activated. So one of the key things is trying to regulate that back down. Okay. Also, when we spoke about distraction activities, a lot of the people, you play games online, play games with your family, board games or whatever, right? Read a book if you can and really get embedded into that. That's the E. So we've got focus on what you're doing, acknowledge your thoughts and feelings, come back into your body, and then engage with what you're doing. Okay. So then we're going to go into the COVID letters. So for C, it's being committed to action. So you remember we said have a routine.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can get really in a position where we've got our routine. So for example, I'm meant to be doing a in-house workout every evening. I'll be honest with you, I've probably in the last 3 days, lights turned off.
You've not paid, have they paid the electric? Yeah, I'd start doing PE with Joe, with Will, but we stopped a little bit. We should get back on it.
Yeah, but you see, you can get into this phase where you think, actually, I can't be bothered today. But it's really being committed to that and thinking, actually, you know what? There are simple ways I can look after myself, and one of them is by doing these physical activities or just simple activities like that. And making it effective when you spend that time. We've also mentioned, it's interesting that we've spoken about just off the cuff. One of the other things that Russ Harris mentions is opening up. So we're not alone in this. Everyone is going through. And when the community are talking to you, when you're out with Polly, one of the things, the reasons they're talking to you about it is because they're opening up and they're sharing. And that old wives' thing of a problem shared is a problem halved really is true.
Yeah.
Right? Being together in the rubbish experience is a lot more supportive than feeling like you're on your own. The V part of COVID is values. Now, this is quite a challenge, right? But it's really important to think about what we value in our life. And doing things when we work or when we're trying to cope with what we're doing at home and when we're isolated, to think, why am I doing this? What are my values that I'm continuing to work with, right? And then also, how do I want to treat other people and how do I want to be treated? So what we've really noticed in society, which is, once again, not really publicized that much, is people are becoming really caring. One thing that we've seen is a more caring community. And that's going to make us all feel a little bit better as we're in this. So the I part of COVID is identify resources, right? So really think about, what can I do for other people? What can I do for my partner? What can I do for my friends? And what can I do? So in our WhatsApp group, right, that we had, somebody said their friend had created this game. We won't talk about the game, but we'll say that we invented the game. But it's another way in which they've used their skills to try and support a wider group of people.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's what you and I are doing right now.
Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely.
So trying to do that. And the final bit is, and this is one of the most important parts, and this really makes me chuckle, right? Because it's about disinfect and distance. Now, it's really made me curious as to how many people were probably not that great at washing their hands, right? And now they're going to have to get really hot on washing their hands.
Well, here, let me reveal something. I don't know if you can see. Can you see how grazed and cut my hands are? Yeah. So here's the thing. Pretty much most blokes I know have got grazed, horrible, dry hands. Yeah. Take my missus, who was a nurse, is a nurse on maternity leave. She's fine. So clearly, my skin is not used to soap. As much as it should be, is not. I'm falling apart. It's ridiculous.
But you see, the interesting thing about that as well is, and this might not get me so many man points, well, I've got hand cream.
Look at that. I've got a tub of Nivea somewhere, but I don't. I tend to go and steal Helen's expensive face cream and put it on my hand, and she's like, "What are you doing?"
But moisturizing, so hand washing, but also moisturizing, and it's about learning these new things. But that's faced COVID, and it really helps. I suppose what we could do is I could send you, and if you wanted to, you could upload it onto some of your spaces and think about it.
Yeah, that'd be really good. Is that what the acronym with? Yeah. No, that's
a really nice poster created. So what happens is, so I'm active on Twitter, but what happens with mental health professionals is that echo chamber you spoke about. Everyone just shares resources within their little echo chamber.
Hard to go outside of that box, isn't it?
Yeah. So what would be really great, and I'm really glad that you reached out and said, actually, maybe we should do this, is because what that means is these resources go beyond psychological and mental health professionals. It goes into a different domain. So I suppose they're the main things that I will say around that.
I was watching. Interesting you say that. Actually, I was watching the news earlier on, and I think they were talking about Finland. I believe it was Finland. You might correct me. Someone may watch this video and say, no, it was another country. But I'm sure they were saying Finland are treating social media influencers as key workers because they recognise that especially the younger age groups in society don't ingest any information from anywhere other than social media. So they want to, it's different to how you're describing it, but they want to almost recruit influencers to push a positive or non-fake news set of information out so that everyone is informed, and I suppose that's kind of a more structured approach, more governmental approach to making sure that you go outside of this little bubble that most of us are all in, because we are kind of a reflection of the people we spend more time with, aren't we, really, I suppose?
Exactly. And I think one of the key things about that is that I've suddenly got a little bit obsessed with infographics. So if I set any of my team to develop something, I'm like, make it into an infographic. Colors and pictures.
You're the one.
So genuinely, I'm like, actually, you know what? We don't learn off reading books and things only. We read by seeing things and remembering things in our minds by color and pictures. So it's really important to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. If you could share, honestly, if you could share that with me, because I'm going to give you an example of someone I'm talking to at the moment, an old school friend of mine. He is a boxer. He's a boxer. He's got a boxing gym. He does boxing events. Not traditionally the most natural person to talk about his feelings and how he is. And you're talking about sort of society being more open and trying to help people, his first reaction to all of this is, right, I'm going to get all of the people I know from the boxing community. I'm going to start doing a group, and we're going to start helping each other. And some of the guys, the guys and ladies in that group, perhaps might not have had access to talk to someone like you or seen some of the information that you're talking about. Again, because just not because they've not looked, because they've not known it's there. And it's different groups of people look at different stuff on a regular basis, don't they? So.
Yeah. And I think the key thing about that, I'm really keen on, that sounds like a real grassroots kind of model where people have just gone, right, what do we need to do? And let's just mobilize and do something.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's help people,
Yeah. And I think those pockets of things that can happen can be really beautiful. They're those kind of grand and romantic ideas that you're just sitting there thinking, this isn't right. What can I do? And that guy that who's just gone, you know what, I'm going to do this. And he really takes off. And sometimes they can be better than we can sometimes over professionalize some of the things. So some of the things I've spoken to you about, people will be doing without knowing that they're doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Without the label, sort of. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. But it's great.
No, fantastic. I mean, look, have you, just to sort of wrap up, I mean, I could talk to you for hours about this. I would just sit and talk to you for hours anyway, irrespective of having this to talk about. Would you have any kind of final thought for anyone who might be watching this that might help, or I don't know, anything?
I think one of the biggest things I'm really keen on telling people is it's really important to think about the idea that this is totally normal if you're feeling anxious, right? It's totally normal and it's totally understandable. However, the one thing that we're not very good at, particularly in the Western world, we're not very good at, is holding on to uncertainty, right? We don't really deal well with uncertainty because we always like to know what we're doing, we like to be in control, and we like to move forward with that. One of the good ways of dealing with uncertainty, and that's what anxiety is, trying to think about how you're going to manage uncertainty in the future, is thinking about Apple. So Apple is another acronym, right? So Apple is to acknowledge
what is it?
Apple and face COVID. Run with those two and you'll be great. So Apple is to acknowledge that, yeah, I'm uncertain, I don't know what's going to happen. Not to be blasé about it, just to go, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. So acknowledge it. The second thing is pause. When we get anxious as people, we try and do stuff. Everyone is trying to do things. So I suppose what the example I'd use is, if you had a glass of water and you started stirring it, right, and you stirred it faster and faster, the water creeps up the side of the glass, right? Because we're doing something. But if you just stopped it, the water settles back down again. So when we pause, rather than doing something and winding ourselves up, if we just pause for a moment and really reflect on what's going on in our body and where we're at and the anxiety and being okay with that, that's the first P. The second P is to pull back. Once we notice we're getting anxious or stressed, just to pull back a little bit and go, okay, what's going on for me? Why am I doing this? And how is it going to help me? So the what, why, how. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? How is it going to help? Then to let go. So remember I said the 4-second breathing?
Yeah.
Right? That 4-point breathing can really help you to let go of that tension, and it can reduce your central nervous system a little bit down so you're not as aroused. And finally is explore. Explore things that you've not done before, right? Learn new skills. So I've got people who are learning languages, and learning to cook, and learning recipes and knitting and things like that. Learn to do new things that really take your attention. Yeah. And that would be my biggest thing. Acknowledge it, pause, pull back. I've forgotten the let go, and explore new things.
You do. I mean, that is an NHS badge on what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No, makes perfect. I suppose it's giving yourself permission to not live in it all the time, isn't it, really?
You know what? I think that is a good point to be. That's a good summary. That what you've just said is far better than some of the other points. Giving yourself permission to not live in it all the time. And what I might do, Ben, is I will borrow that and share it with my team and spread it around.
Do it. You spread it around. You spread it around, Abs. No, look, Abs, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. I really appreciate you going through, these things, and I genuinely think it'll help quite a lot of people. Hopefully a lot of people, or even if it just helps one person who watches it. It's worth it. It's worth it to me, to be fair. Brilliant. No, well, look, thank you very much for your time, mate. And I hope you have a really great day, yeah?
You too. Take care.
Cheers.